creative people, artists are very guarded with their true, like what they really want. You know what I mean? Like they can be very outgoing, extroverted, and smile and all that stuff. But like the real thing, like really guarded with it, and they should be.
Welcome to the Business Mindset Podcast, where we document the stories of Black entrepreneurs around Canada. I am your host, Nina Barango, and together we will explore the world of entrepreneurship through the journeys of our incredible guests. Let's get started.
Welcome to Tiny Condo Session, everybody. How are we today? I think I needed a little bit more energy. I said, welcome to Tiny Condo Session, everybody. How are we today? Amazing.
Today on the pod, I have a shipwreck.
You did it.
Do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure.
Okay.
My name is Folarin Odunayo, and what do? I'm Executive Director at YAWA Media. Yeah.
What does that mean?
What does YAWA Media mean, or?
Executive Director at YAWA Media.
Director in the sense of that, like I help move the company in a direction, and executive meaning I execute and I action things. Versus a creative director would be someone who's like ideating and also direction. Yeah.
So you're not creative?
I'm very creative.
Okay.
My role is just being executive director at the company, yeah.
And YAWA Media, what does that mean?
Well, YAWA means trouble, YAWA D. I tried to get a definition like forever ago when we first started, but let's stick with trouble.
So trouble.
Yeah.
Okay.
YAWA D. And YAWA Media, what does it mean? In this present moment, what it stands for, what we do is we're operating as an entertainment company in the creative space, touching on music, artist management, live performances, things like that.
Okay. So tell me a bit about what it's like to manage artists.
Very stressful.
Okay.
But everything is stressful. Anything is stressful, really. Anything you want to do well is stressful. So that's a bit of a cop-out answer. But it's fun. I really connect with creative people and musicians and artists. So for me, like, the most fulfilling aspect of artist management as a concept is really when you look at an artist and you see that, like, you're helping them actualize a dream or actualize something on the path. Like, that's phenomenal. So yeah.
Are you an artist yourself?
I've been told to speak more about myself as an artist, yes. Yeah.
Okay, so in the spirit of speaking more about yourself as an artist, what does that look like for you?
So let me like really localize it and say, like, in the last year, what it's meant is trying to reconnect with the version of myself that really saw himself as an artist or as a musician, and then like making peace with that and then doing that really well for my own standards, you know. So for me, being an artist is like, can I pick up my guitar and play something that I enjoy? Can I, play something on the drums that doesn't sound terrible? And then the second aspect of that actually is performance. Like, there are lots of talented people who play instruments, who do a lot of things creative and do it really well. Not many people perform that, right? And so for me, the second layer was like, can I play guitar well? Can I sing well? Can I play drums well? And then can I perform music? Can I perform a song and like leave something with the audience, you know what I mean? Or leave something with someone in the audience, that kind of stuff. And in the last year, I think I've been able to do that progressively well. Or I've progressed at being able to do that to a level that makes me feel like, okay, yeah, I can probably get away with calling myself an artist. Yeah.
So, do you know what's funny? On the way here, I was listening to A Word with Flo.
Nice.
And it was one of your episodes where you talked about who am I and finding yourself and having that random conversation. I guess I'm curious, what came first? The version of yourself that was an artist or the version of yourself that managed artists? Like, would you say that because you had experienced what it was like to fall in love with music and performances, that's why YAWA kind of focuses on entertainment, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, 100%. So like, I mean, I've been playing music since I was 7. So definitely the musician version of myself, the creative version of myself, the person that wants to do, or wants to be around artists, wants to be around creative people. Like my eyes light up when we're doing that stuff. Like that for sure came first. I think in my journey, what artist management has been, or I would say just being a company or creating a company that exists in the artist space, like what that really is me and the people I work with trying to find how we fit in the picture, you know. And I do find that a lot of creative people, a lot of artists, a lot of musicians, the management side, the administrative side, the numbers side isn't why they're there. It's not what they want to do. It's not what's interesting to them. It's not what's exciting. It's not what's easy or come easy to them. But fortunately for me, like I kind of have that skill set, and I've invested in building that skill set. So that's definitely come after, and it's been something that we've been trying to improve, you know, since we started, kind of thing. Yeah.
Interesting. And these artists, I guess, are they all kind of like new in the space? Are they established artists? Like, I guess I'm trying to understand, like, how are you able to select what artists comes under your management at YAWA?
Yeah, so I mean, I should clarify what management exactly means, because it's a very broad, you know, big stroke, like artist manager or whatever the case may be. So I'll do 2 things. I'll clarify that, and then I'll get to talk about the selection thing. Yeah. So, you know, in my case, when it was like, okay, this is something I would be interested in doing, it's more so about what value can I bring to whoever the person I'm working with, right? It's important then to realize what it is you can't bring. Like, I can't pull up to an artist with 10 years experience in the game, you know, and be like, I can provide value to you. Like, I don't know what I'm talking about, so that's unlikely. So at that stage, it was a lot of the emerging, it was a lot of people who are similar to me, trying to find their space, trying to find what the journey in music or in creativity could look like. And then it's also thinking about my skill set, which is like, you know, building a plan, having, I'm a very resourceful person, so having connections and you know, an approach to figuring out how to make something happen with as little resources as possible.
Right.
So, you know, at that stage, it was a lot of that, you know, working with people to execute a vision that they might have, but taking on the administrative burden, or taking on the planning, taking on the strategic thinking, taking on, you know, communication sometimes, representation sometimes in conversation, things like that, at that stage. So, yeah, that's kind of like me figuring out the value I could bring early on. And then, you know, to answer your earlier question about like how do we approach selecting artists, selecting feels a bit strong at this stage that we're in, because it's like my door isn't being busted down with people like, oh my God, I want to work with you, you know. But I do think we have to be intentional about who we work with,
right?
Because not everyone is the right fit, you know what I mean? And not every relationship, not every artist vision kind of like works for my style of management or my style of approaching or working in this space and stuff like that. So for me, the most important thing is, you know, something I ask potential clients is, why do you want to work with me? You know, and I ask that not because like there needs to be a right answer, but I need to have insight into what you see that I'm bringing, what do you see my value is, and if the thing I think I'm good at and the thing you think I'm good at doesn't align, then we have a problem, right? Like, or we're going to run into a problem pretty soon, right? But if the thing I think I'm good at is the same thing you think I'm good at, perfect. You know, we're starting from the right place. You know what I mean?
What is the thing you think you're good at?
Everything, obviously. I don't know. Like, it's tough. So I like to have a lot of conversations with artists and really try and understand what it is they're trying to do. So, you know, in the professional sense, we'd say discovery, you know.
A discovery call?
Yeah, kind of like, you know,
right.
not just a call, but an approach, you know, like,
okay.
Creative people, artists are very guarded with their true, like what they really want, you know what I mean? Like, they can be very outgoing, extroverted, and, you know, smiling and stuff, but like the real thing, like, really guarded with it, and they should be, because it's precious. So I work hard. I don't know if I'm good at it, but I work hard to try and get them to a place where they can share that actual thing, or those things. And if you can share those things, then the person you're working with has an understanding of how they can help you. And if you can't, or it's difficult, then it's going to be a struggle. And then the other thing I think I probably do really well, exceptionally well, better than most, I would say, is really knowing how to organize people around what a goal or a project or a vision might be. Finding the path of least resistance, finding resources to be able to make it happen. I'm a big MVP, meaning like we don't need the perfect version of it to like before we get going. And so I know a lot of artists get stuck in like it has to be this, like, and you started something, so you kind of probably know that, right? It has to be this is what it looks like, and sometimes it doesn't really. And so getting us going so that we can like start to improve as we go, like that's probably something I'm good at.
I think the thing I really like about creators and creatives is the fact that a lot of them are able to do a lot from a little. I think that's also why a lot of times they're quite guarded, because it's like, I know what I'm able to do, but because I'm emerging, or just because I have limited resources, I'm almost forced, but kind of made to be resourceful. But then what they don't realize is that is an actual strength of them to be able to do the most regardless.
Yes.
But let's back up a bit, because I think we've kind of just jumped into the deep.
Fair.
So you've been an artist since you were 7. Now you're older than 7.
I hope so.
Let's not age you. Now you're older than 7 and you're into artist management. But how did you get here from the 7-year-old that was playing drums?
I started with drums.
Okay.
So I've been a musician since I was 7. So
musician.
Yeah, that struck me, because I know that people people define artists, I think, as someone who maybe is trying to make a living out of their creativity or their talent, right? Like,
is that?
Well, I would say that's probably how I see it. I was like,
right.
People say.
Okay.
No, that's how that's probably like how I engage with it, because again, like, talent is everywhere. There's your accountant at your company is probably a crazy pianist, you know what I mean? But makes a living as an accountant and that kind of thing. And an artist is probably someone who's like, presents himself to the world this way and would like to, make a living and just show up in that way. That's probably what I would say. But to answer your question more specifically, I started playing drums when I was really young. I started playing guitar when I was like 12-ish. And a lot of that was in church, right? So that was kind of like the foundation of my music journey, if you will, which is playing in church and using my talents to serve God.
Right, you are a pastor's kid.
Exactly, yeah. And so that's like phase 1 of the journey, if you will. And that goes on till I'm 16, 17. I'm in second year university, and it's getting harder to maintain that practice for me.
Why?
Lots of reasons. So I've been through some church hurt, a couple of things in the church didn't sit well in my spirit,
Okay. Okay.
And from like 14 to 16, that's like,
you're growing and you're seeing and you're understanding. I'm a pastor's kid too.
And I'm not loving.
And you're not loving, but you can't speak much because you're supposed to be a certain way. And so, like, it's dicey.
Very uncomfortable. And, like we're talking before the camera started rolling, I'm a little bit of a shipwreck, which put that in my 14-year-old body means I'm very outspoken.
Right.
I'm very...
rebellious?
I was thinking rebellious, but I was trying to be kinder to myself, but let's go with rebellious.
You know what? Do the kind thing, because it's 2024.
Yeah, well, I guess I was refusing to be...
refusing to conform.
Yes, oh.
You're welcome.
Sounds like you may have been through something similar. I'm
a pastor's kid. My brothers also had their phases, so I definitely know what you're talking about.
Yeah, so conformity was definitely something that, like, I disagreed with fundamentally, is particularly if communication is not two-way, and if the powers that be are not intentional about communicating certain things, like that definitely stirs up my my desire to say no. And so like that had been brewing for some time, and then, you know, by the time I got to second year uni, like the church I was going to was like an hour and a half away by bus. Like it was a lot of constraints on myself to keep up the habit I'd had for I guess 10 years at that point. So I fell away from playing actively in church. And for an instrument like drums, like, you know, once you do that, like it's very difficult to, you know, maintain your skills and your practice and whatever. I played a little bit more guitar at that point.
Actually, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
There's this thing about drummers in church.
Don't kill me. Go.
There's this thing, I don't know if it's the fact that they just feel like they're the most important, like, musician in like the band.
Interesting.
But there's this type of swagger that they typically carry around, whether it fits or not.
Okay.
And I guess like in Canada, like in churches, in Nigerian churches in Canada, you see in how they dress, the time they show up.
The time they show
up.
The
time they leave.
Okay.
Because it's like, okay, I show up right on time, I do my thing, I'm out.
I see.
With their little Chelsea boots and like.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
the story is getting very specific.
No. Walk with me.
Okay,
Walk
I'm
with me.
Here. Yeah.
I'm curious.
Okay.
Why do you guys? And now I'm generalizing, obviously.
That's right.
But what is it about playing the drums that just feeds into a man's? Because it's 99% of the drummers I've encountered. I think I've only ever met one that was a female drummer.
Nice.
99% of the drummers I've encountered are male, and they literally all are like have the same aura of like, okay, now I'm here, let's get started, and when we're done, I'm out, and don't even bother me.
Interesting. The air of arrogance is fascinating. I think that's generally artists and musicians.
Do you know what's funny? I didn't call it arrogance.
I think I picked up. Yeah, you're right. These are my words. I'll own that. I'll own that. So, like, musically speaking, right? Your drummer is your timekeeper. You know, so like in a band, you know, your drummer is a very elevated position from how the audience experiences the music. And straight away, even like as I've gotten better at what it is that I do, the weakest link in any team, right, is really important. That's your floor, right? And like you can have an exceptional guitarist, you can have an exceptional keyboardist, but if your drummer is mid, your band is going to be at that level.
Really?
Right. Yeah. So I find, and maybe I'm speaking as a drummer, but I'm mostly a guitarist these days. So, but I'm sure other musicians, I hope you agree with this. But you know, I would say that like your drummer is probably the floor. So if you have a really talented drummer, that's the floor for your band and how your team's going to sound.
Right.
Yeah. And drummers know that. You know. So,
of course they do.
Exactly.
That's
so
what it's.
You got to talk to them nice.
Once I see the Chelsea boots, I'm like, here we go.
Yeah.
Here we go.
You should speak to this brother about your feelings. I think you should let him know how you feel about the Chelsea boots.
I hate them. Yeah. In case you're watching, I hate them.
That's fair.
Anyways, back to you. You're 17.
Yeah.
1 hour away from church.
Yeah.
How did I?
1 hour plus, and I was in Ottawa at the time. You know, winters.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Winter used to whoop my ass getting there, all that stuff. So,
what church was this?
Rema Christian Ministries.
Interesting.
Yeah, at the time. And, you know, it's funny that you mentioned the gender of, like, drummers and stuff, but, like, there's a female drummer who was, like, the lead at the time. She was incredible. Very intimidating with how good she was. And so, like, yeah, there was a lot for me at that time. I don't know if it was a lot or I was just incapable of processing well, whichever. But I kind of just started fading in terms of playing in church and being active in that way. But your question was, how did I get here?
Right.
You know, fast forward a few years, the remainder of my university experience, I was playing a lot of just acoustic guitar, doing coffee houses. I love cover songs. I love songs. So I was just like, I'm going to lean in on that. So I'm doing a lot of like that kind of stuff at coffee houses throughout campus.
How did you get those gigs?
I think gigs as much as you just... I'm also like a very curious person. So I just pull up. I'm playing guitar. Like, you know... on campus, there are a lot of these events, you know.
Like you just walked to the coffee store, shop, and said, I want to play.
Or the organizers. Yeah, so a coffee house is like a broader term for like, you know, on campus there's a coffee shop, and then there's like a, Latino Students Association is doing something, or the Nigerian Students Association is doing something.
Right.
They would like 2 or 3 people to come play. I'm like, I play guitar, I kind of sing, I'll do something. Or like there's like a talent show. And I remember at Carleton, the Ghanaian Students Association used to always host something called Gold Dust, and it was like a bit of a talent show. Gold Dust.
Gold Dust, okay.
Codes is hilarious. Yeah, and like once a year it was kind of like a thing. So by second year, by third year, you knew it was coming around. So that you would prepare and stuff like that. So none of them were paid opportunities, I should say. Like these were all like you're just getting out there. And
back in the day, we used to get paid with exposure, especially on campus.
Yeah.
So
and for me, because I loved it, and it was like it's an identity piece. It was like an expression of myself, that kind of stuff. Like I would seek out these things, and I would try to be there, and I would try to do all those things. And then towards the latter years of being on campus, I started to do more. I was more active in student politics and student leadership stuff, and then I started to play way less at that point. So it completely fell off the music wagon between all the instruments or the 2 instruments that I played at the time. Then I graduated. And I realized that I was really far away and not connected to music at all, not connected to something that was like a big part of my identity for so long, So I was 21, 22 by the time I graduated, and it's like, holy, like, I would pick up my guitar and be like, I can't play, I would, try to learn a song and it'd be like, this is hard, this is impossible, this feels, this, that. And it definitely affected me and like how I viewed myself. And again, there's other things that's going on at the same time, trying to find a job, trying to get a postgraduate work permit, trying to be an adult, all of these things. And it's like, oh God, like, what's my foundation? What's my, I think what's really cool about having a thing that you do for so long is that becomes your point of reference to everything else in the world.
Right.
Yeah, and I genuinely felt between like 2022, I'd lost my point of reference. I didn't have the thing that anchored me. And for a long time it was music, you know what I mean? So, yeah, so a lot of my 20s was like rediscovering that and like refiguring it out and all that jazz. And then, fast forward a lot of years, I was working at a bank. I was not liking my career as a financial advisor, looking for a way to be a creative person and be wealthy. To simplify it, you know what I mean?
Isn't that all of us?
Right?
Did you figure it out?
I'm still figuring it out. I don't know that there's a I don't know that there's a point that you have it figured out, to be fair. But I'm definitely still figuring it out, But it did involve, like, for me, radically revising what my point of reference was, to stick to that analogy, and aggressively approaching it, and like not being afraid to reconnect with that, and go back to, playing, so I would pick up my acoustic guitar, play again, try and play again. Mm-hmm. I bought an electric guitar, I was like, okay, I'm going to teach myself, because every instrument I've played, I basically taught myself, so like just get back into it. That was kind of like the entry point, really, 2017, right. 2018, just get back into learning, and not being in my head about it, right? And then, so artist management. So, and then after all of that, I went to grad school for innovation and management and entrepreneurship.
In Kingston, exactly. I was supposed to do that program.
Why didn't you?
I actually got accepted and everything right in 2021.
Oh, nice.
I was supposed to start in 2020. Actually, I was supposed to start in 2020. COVID hit. Okay. Then they gave us a cop out. They were like, "Oh, we typically don't refund deposits, but if you don't want to do your masters anymore, we can give you a deposit back. We'll keep you on the wait list." And I was like, "Sure, give me my money back." Yeah. So then I was on the wait list. But the thing about Nigerian parents and like always wanting their children to have like the highest degrees. So like my dad will always be like, "When are you doing your masters? You said you were going to Queen's University." And I was like, yeah, I'm on the wait list. Like, it's not a priority for me right now because obviously the world might end. So I even moved to, I was living in Ottawa at the time. I moved to Toronto. I moved back to Toronto in 2021, and I was supposed to start my master's in 2021. And then I was just like, why am I getting a master's again? Like, it was one of those things when I realized that I actually didn't want to get a master's. I wanted to get my dad to have a daughter with a master's. And then I was just like, first of all, my dad was retiring. He wasn't gonna pay my master's tuition. And even though like I was a permanent resident at that point, OSAP was like, oh, you earn above a certain threshold, so we're actually not gonna pay
the full thing.
The full thing. We're not even gonna give you half.
Mud.
We're just gonna give you some money. And I was like, oh, this is ridiculous.
Some money's not enough. Yeah.
Some money's not enough. I did not come here through international student route and all of that to still get into debt for a degree that I don't want. But that's how I did end up doing my master's.
Oh, that's so interesting. We would have crossed paths because 2020 was the year I got accepted as well.
Really?
Yeah, and this is how I know I'm a crazy person, because you said you didn't because the world was going to shit, for lack of a better term, and I was like, oh, I should because the world is going. This is exactly why. So 2020, 2021 was my year. So we definitely would have crossed paths.
Literally would have been in the same set. That's wild.
And for me, it was like I said, I was on the path. I was a financial advisor. I'd been doing that for years at the time. I was doing well as a financial advisor. Again, it became my point of reference. You know how so like everything I would do was like, but I was terrified. I hated it. I was terrified because like I would look around me and everyone, 10 years in the job, 15 years in the job, they've got their portfolio, and it's just like, yep, this is what you do. You come in 9 to 5, you leave 5:30, and
that's
10 years later, you're still here. And I was like, I cannot do this for 10 years. I will, And so I really needed something to change the way I think. And so not just any master's program, because I'd done the whole like go for a master's thing. So similar to what you're saying, like I think it's a really cool realization for you to have been like, I don't want a degree. Like I want my dad to feel really good because his daughter has a degree.
Right.
You know what I mean? And that distinction is really important. Because the first time I ever applied for a master's program was a master's of economics, and I definitely did not want that degree. I definitely didn't. And so when it came the second time to think about, okay, well, what do you want to study? Like, what do you want to learn? How do you want to think differently? That was how I approached like applying for or finding a program that fit. And the reason I landed on management, innovation, and entrepreneurship at Queen's was. I call it like a MBA, a junior MBA or creative business degree. That's how I describe it to people, which is that like it gives you the foundations of thinking like a business person.
Right.
And you do learn those courses. You do go out and sort of learn about venture financing and how to structure a business and how to build a high performing team. And like how to lead. But it also forces you to think creatively about the type of ventures, the type of businesses that you would like to be a part of, either as an entrepreneur or an intrapreneur, which essentially would be
being in a company.
Yeah, within your existing structure, how would you think about things differently? And so I love that, and they made you come up with like 5 ideas, and actually that was really at the start. To bring this all back to YAWA, at the time, we were still we were still running it as a audio company or a podcast networking type company with a magazine.
Right.
And the idea at the time was that like there's this gap in the media space, which you're doing a brilliant job of filling,
thank you.
that highlights creative Black people, but like creative Black people who are from Nigeria, broadly Africa, but are now in Canada. Because the way I would talk to people about it is that in 20 years there's going to be some kid named Tunde like who's born in Oshawa and like has been to Nigeria once and like he was 7,
right,
and now he's like 14 and he's looking for examples in media of like kids named Tunde who sound like they're from Oshawa, but like want to be a journalist or like want to be a singer, but like how, and the CBC or CBC Radio or what else exists out here, Toronto Star, like these outlets, they do a decent job, but not even close to enough, you know? So the point of YAWA Magazine and YAWA Media at the time and how it communicated is like, we need to be documenting people like us who are actively trying to forge a path so that in 10, 15 years, people who are looking for that it's easy, and it's there for them. So that was the idea. 2017, 2018, 2019, and then when I was applying to MMIE program, they were like, oh, well, who are you and what do you do? And like, and part of it's like, okay, well, we just kind of like started this thing. I want to learn how to run this as a business, and I want to learn how to turn it into an actual company, and not just like a page on Instagram, you know what I mean? That kind of thing. And yeah, so yeah, they make you pitch it, you know, and all that jazz, and it was fantastic for me. Like it really changed entirely how I think about. It changed how I think about business, how I think about creativity, how I think about value creation, finding value. There's a lot there. Forgive my rant, but
no, that's fine. Sometimes I wonder how my life would change, because I think I went through a similar application process. I had pitched my business so plugged at the time, which back then it was just a directory, and I was like, oh, I'm trying to connect people to Black people, like I'm trying to create like a online community, and I don't know if they understood it, but they definitely loved it, because in those kind of spaces I find that these people, mainstream organizations, let's just call them that, mainstream organizations, love to see Black people create spaces for themselves, because then they don't have to.
Mad.
And so they're like, oh wow, you're creating a media company that highlights Nigerians in the diaspora that are doing this. Wow, love that for you. Will we support you? Maybe we'll repost you, maybe we'll accept you in here, maybe we'll do this surface level things that help, but we won't actually take the onus on us with all our resources to actually do this.
And 2020 was the year for that.
It was.
Yeah, 2020 was the year. Rest in peace, George Floyd.
Everybody loved that. Everybody was giving Black people money. Like, it's like, oh, you want to do Black? Take. And now it's like crickets. It's like, meanwhile, those organizations, those spaces are still there, but like those mainstream people who were handing out dollars, they're now like, oh, it's all balanced, the world is all good, it's post-COVID now, you know, nobody remembers, you know, all the protests, nobody remembers the Black squares on Instagram, nobody cares anymore, DEI is gone, and it's left to you, it's left to us to still show up, because you realize, like you said, this thing counts, this thing matters, this thing not just matters for me, but it matters for people to come, whether people to come through immigration, people that are going to be born into this world, into this country, that are going to come after you. It matters, whether they think it matters or they're supporting you financially, you still have to show up. And that's kind of like my dilemma every day when I think about like the landscape of things. But no, it's interesting to hear.
Your dilemma in what sense? Can you break that down for me?
I guess my dilemma in the sense that in 2020, if one of those organizations had given me money, I would have gladly taken it. I would have shouted from the rooftops, we just got money to do X, Y, and Z, even though I knew in my heart that that money was surface level. Like, even though I knew it wasn't like maybe that's just a pessimist to me, but I genuinely believe that those companies were just like, okay, now we're done. Like we've paid our dues. Like it wasn't anything deep for them. It was like, we have extra budget, we've paid our dues. But because there is that power dynamic, because like we need the funds, I will take the funds and I will do my best with the funds. But I also know that, okay, this is not a sustainable relationship. This is not something they're in for the long run. This is just like a 2020 thing. And after that is crickets. And then initially when I thought that to myself, I was like, damn, Nina, you're so pessimistic. But then 4 years down, and I'm like, actually, I was right.
I mean, like your instincts aren't far off, because it's not unfamiliar. Like what I felt, my version of what you're describing, I think, is that 2020 was a massive flashpoint, but it was one of many, if you look at history, that have happened before. So your instincts, the way your body and your mind is interacting with the, like, oh, well, this is superficial, this is surface level.
Right.
Let's see how long it lasts. Let's see how long it sticks. Like, that's not wrong, or what's, I'm looking for what, I mean, you're not
I'm not a messenger of doom.
Yeah, exactly. Like you're
Right.
not pessimistic as much as you're just kind of like, maybe you're a student of history. Maybe you're just aware that like, yeah, these massive corporations, the big five, like it's been done before.
Right.
But in 2020, what it was that it was very widespread, and it was very like it was visceral. It was potent. It was like, you know.
We felt it.
Yeah, we all felt it, and you know the other added layers that there was a lot of social capital to be gained, by doing all these things, and you know chaos is a ladder, right? So to your point as well, like I would have taken the money.
Of course.
Listen, if anyone wants to give me money solely for being black,
take it.
Give me a call. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
take it.
I won't ever say no.
Yeah.
But I think I'm way less naive, and the advice I would give to anyone who's I don't want to give advice, but like if anyone who is creating something or is like worried about like, oh, but they just want to give me money because I'm like, how I would say it to them is this, right? Like, you know, don't think about their intention as much as you think about what you need. You know what I mean? Like,
and what you can do.
Yeah, and of course, if their intention is going to be harmful to you in the long term, yes, consider it, right?
Yeah, of course.
But more so than anything, you know, we're all humans, and we're all connected by, you know, some very natural things. And if you create something that taps into your innate humanness, regardless of if you're black or Asian or South Asian or white, it will transcend that. Like it will connect with a broader, you know, obviously you want to create, like, you know, when I think about how we talk about YAWA, what we do with YAWA, yes, we want to center the black experience in the black diaspora and the Nigerian experience in the Nigerian diaspora. But I think I know innately that when we do a really good job of doing what we do, it doesn't matter if you're Nigerian or if you're black, you're gonna love it and you're gonna want to be there. And to be fair, like we see that kind of like reflected in the audience that we're building and the people who are connecting with what we do, right? When you walk into anything that we do, it's like, yeah, this is a black space. This is a lot of, you know,
it's black as fuck.
Yeah, but you know, there's a lot of really white people in our spaces, and they're comfortable. They love it. Took some time. Got to educate them on some pieces, but like they love it. They want to be there, and it's not about our blackness or whatever the case may be, or Nigerianness, you know, for lack of a better term.
I mean, now since we're kind of gearing towards your Tiny Condo Sessions, I think the first one I saw, someone must have reposted it or something, and like the first thing I saw was like, who the hell is Ship Wreck Flo, and why is he doing comedy? Like, I think it was one of the things you were just saying, right? And I think I watched it a couple of times and I was just like, huh? Like, what is going on here? It was something you were saying around being okay, you were saying I'm unemployed.
Oh God.
I'm single or something, and everybody was like, "Aw," and I'm like, "What is this? Is this stand up? Is this like a get together? Is this charades? Like, what is going on here?" So, how did that come up?
Well, that particular one, that was a plea for sympathy to the audience. So,
okay.
Yeah, I was single.
Right.
I'd just been laid off, and I'd just been kicked off my football team. So that was
people get kicked off.
People get kicked off if you're arrogant like me. I can explain that story.
Okay.
At another time. Yeah, offline. But yeah, that must have been the clip you saw. So how did Tiny's Condo Session come about? Was the question.
Yeah.
Oh God. So, you know, back to the journey of, you know, trying to reconnect with my artistic self and perform more and get better at that. So February, March 2023, I'm trying to get out there. I'm trying to play more by myself. I've been supporting some artists at this time, but just by myself and express. And I suck. I'm not very good.
At what?
At performing.
Right.
It's just terrible.
Right.
Like, you know, I can sit in my bedroom and play guitar and it's fine, but I get on a stage and I forget the chords, I forget the lyrics, my voice is shaking, my knees are shaking.
You just said you were arrogant.
Well, yeah, you can be arrogant and terrible, which is a lot of people. Yeah, you know, arrogance has nothing to do with your actual ability.
I just assumed. Yeah. Anyways, continue.
Yeah. No, that's fair. No, I was bad. And I realized I was bad because I have taste. You know, like I know when an artist is good, right? And people are cutting like, oh, you're great.
Of course.
That was ass. And so I really wanted a space for myself to like practice and get better. And I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna do it. I'm gonna invite some people over and I'm gonna play, and hopefully that's an opportunity for me to practice the set that I've been working on, that kind of stuff. Luckily for me, I know a lot of talented people, and so I'm like, you know what? It can't just be me inviting my friends over for me to perform, because it's going to be 20 minutes and it's going to be mediocre, you know? So like, how are they going to enjoy it? So you know what? I'm going to get 4 of my friends who are talented as well. They're going to play a set, and you know, we'll see how that goes. And so that's the first one up there, April 2nd, 2023. Yeah.
Interesting.
So like obviously I'm extra, so I'm like, I'm gonna make an invite, you know, I'm gonna do all these things. It can't just be simple. And I DM it to, you know, 25 of my friends. I'm like, you know, I text them or whatever, and I'm like, hey, this thing's happening. Pull up. It'd be amazing to see you. This is what's gonna happen. And they did. They came. It was a really, really good time. My set was okay. I think I did okay.
It wasn't mediocre?
It was probably really mediocre,
okay.
But like, you know, it wasn't bad, but it was like a stepping stone. It was a foundation. And I really enjoyed how people interacted with what was going on. Not just my music, but the music of others, and like just the feeling in the room, the vibe, all that jazz. I really enjoyed it. And so that was the first one. I talk about it a few times in the show, but when I was growing up, my nickname was Tiny, and so there's
okay. Let's just pause. How did you go from being a shipwreck to being Tiny?
That's fair. Tiny came first. Yeah, Tiny came first. So, right. You know, it would be 2001, 2002 or so. So I grew up in Malaysia. It's additional context. So my family had moved to Malaysia. I was joining a secondary school in Brunei, which is like a neighboring country, and the school is majority people from England, majority people from like Australia, expats basically.
Right.
Just a bunch of expats, and you know, either like you worked in Shell or you worked in like Petronas or the Bruneian equivalent, or your parents were in the British Army, or like you came from a neighboring country, whatever. All of that just to say there were a lot of white people.
Right.
And then of course some locals. And I was really, really small for a kid in year 7. You know, I was 10 years old when I was in year 7. Most kids were like 11 plus, you know. So I was younger and just physically smaller. And I think maybe 6 months in, maybe less than a year in, a group of girls, like 2 or 3 girls who I was friends with, they observed that I was a small kid, and very specifically that I had a tiny ass. And so they started this by calling me Tiny Ass. And
sorry for the laugh.
No, that's okay. I've been laughing since. Obviously, you have to fight back against something.
Right.
Excuse me. So I fought back against the second half of that, and so just Tiny. And it just kind of stuck. Like my friends called me that. Teachers called me that. Like it just.
What do you mean?
The entire time I was there. Like my nickname was Tiny, and so and then the whole shipwreck thing was for me just being super hyperactive.
So you were a tiny hyperactive kid in Malaysia.
Yeah.
What could go wrong?
A lot.
Wow.
A lot. Thankfully, nothing did. Shout out Jesus.
Oh, I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, it's okay.
You're not getting over this name. Sorry.
No.
That's a perfect name. I love it.
And to be fair, like obviously there's like some, at the time there was some like, I'm not tiny, you know, but like facts are facts, bro. You're quite small, you know, like
highlight the ass, like of all things, like
all
I
things.
mean, okay.
Of all things, I mean, it was cute at the time. It was just more like, you know.
Okay, don't push it.
She said, "Don't push it."
Tiny
ass. But yeah.
So what was the initial reaction of people to Tiny Condo Session? Like the first time you DM'd your friends, come over, I'm going to perform. I'm going to bring some people to perform. What was that initial reaction like?
Well, thankfully, I have really cool and supportive people around me, and I didn't really position it the way I've described it as like, oh, this is a thing about me and my emotions. It was like, hey, come, there's gonna be other artists, there's gonna be food, there's gonna be drinks. It's a Sunday afternoon. So that was another thing, trying to find the right time in the week or whatever to do it. And Sunday afternoon really resonated with the feeling that I wanted. And yeah, so people were like, okay, like I'm down, I'll be there. And to be fair, like the first one, I still have all the names. Like I invited 25 people or so, and 22 people showed up. Like it was like really, really, really cool. And because it was like a personal thing, I would literally text them. You know, it wasn't like a event you're signing up for, right? It was like, hey, like this thing's happening in my house. Like it would be cool if you came, kind of thing. So that first one was really about like friends coming to support a guy.
Right.
You know,
right.
I really feel that. And so, you know, your question was like, how do people respond? I think people responded with like compassion and support and like, you know, this is why we're here kind of thing. Like, we're going to have a good time. There's meat pie, there's sausages, whatever. But like, you know.
Well, you're telling them that like life has been tough. Of course they would like be like you don't kick a man when he's down. So
that's fair.
Was that the first one?
No, that wasn't the first one. The first one that you saw, life did get dramatically worse after. So, yeah.
Got it.
Okay, yeah. So, I mean, like, 3 days before the second one in May. So after the first one, it went really well. And like while people were leaving, you know, someone just like left a comment like, "Yo, this is really good. Like this kind of like felt like the Flo show." And I have an obsession with like late night TV. I really love like, you know, podcasts. I've been hosting and producing podcasts for a while at this point. So I really enjoy the idea of like entertainment for people in a distilled format. So that comment really like sent a light bulb going off in my head, and I'm like, you know what, I'm gonna do it again. And so I planned the next one in May, like literally that evening, and then started inviting people over. 3 days before the next one in May, I got laid off at my job. Life got worse, and so it's like, holy, okay, well, I guess I might as well keep going. Might as well just have it anyway. So I have the second one. That went really well too. I'm like, okay, it's really encouraging. I'd invited a slightly broader pool of people, and that one was less attended actually, which hurt my feelings. But that was a signal, a sign to like, okay, well, is it about the attendance? Like, what is it about? It forced me to ask like some questions to myself, like, what is this thing about, kind of thing. And then, so I started planning the one for June, and before the one in June, I got kicked off my football team. And then it's like, okay, my life seems to be going in a direction here that like chaos or whatever. So the one in June is kind of like the one that you see where I'm like.
But this whole time you're single, because I was waiting for you to say, someone broke my heart.
No, that had happened prior to, But,
got it.
I seem to always be in a state of heartbreak anyway, so yeah.
Should we talk about?
You ask you questions, you know, like.
No. Like I think I really like how intimate the shows are, because I recently discovered jazz.
Ooh, nice.
And I recently started attending like live jazz performances.
Okay.
I just found them to be very like intimate and soulful and like tender, like almost like they could cry, but like they rather not. They rather play music. Like it was very well like yeah. And so I was like, oh, I like this a bit of me, because sometimes like I get very deep, but a lot of people are used to like my bright and like loud and like life of the party. But then when I get a bit deep or maybe melancholic somber, or just somber, everybody's like, huh, are you sick? Like, but anyways, I think I really like how you've been able to keep it intimate, but I'm assuming that like it must be a lot of work to pull off, like finding the people that will perform. Now I'm sure you're getting like a larger group of people. It's not just people you know. It's a bit, am I right or wrong with that?
You're absolutely correct.
Right. So like, how have you been navigating producing the shows now that it's been a year and like it's bigger? Yeah,
you know, like you use some great words there. Tender. I'm talking about jazz, not the show. Okay. You know, tender and like soft and focused on the music. These are things that I really enjoy about music myself. Like that's the kind of music I prefer to listen to, and like and like lyrics that are provocative, that are expressive, vulnerable. Like these are the elements of music that I really connect with. And so as soon as I realized that I wanted this to be a show, these were things that I wanted to see in the show, right? By the time we get to the fourth or fifth one, I start to realize that like this show is the best part of this show have nothing to do with me. Right? Because this starts as like, I need to get better at guitar and singing. So like, you know, but then like by show 4, I'm talking to people often and people are like, oh my God, this was great. And they'll be very complimentary for like 5 minutes, not mention me once.
Did that hurt your ego?
Yes and no, but like, yes, in the sense that like, it didn't hurt my ego, but like my ego was like, where is the compliment? Where's the flow related thing? You know what I mean? Like, but I think the larger ego thing is like, oh my God, I've created something people connect with, you know? Which is just as important to me, you know? Like, so that's why I would say it's not hurt. Like, I wasn't sitting there like, you know? But it's just more like, oh my God, like, wait, people are, you know? And another thing that really struck me was that like, I lived in a place that was really inaccessible. And yet people would come and enjoy themselves, and like, as much as I was apologetic about, you know, oh my God, I know it's hard to get here, whatever, they were fine with it, you know, because they were like, I mean, yeah, I came, sure, it sucked, but like, now that I've experienced it, it was great, kind of thing. So, you know, around like show 4, show 5, I kind of start, like, okay, like this, how can I make this a thing that helps other artists? Because that's another thing that's really key for this, is that like, you know, artists need spaces to practice being good at what they do without it being the stage that, you know, you know, that you're seeing them on. And I guess conceptually in my mind, it was kind of like, by the time you get to performing for 100 people, you know, there should be some sort of, you should be refined. And artists tend to like put a lot of pressure on themselves. Like, you know, you miss a chord and that's all you think about, you know, and all that jazz. And so I was like, how do I create this space that they can feel like comfortable testing things, and like the room is ready for whatever, you know, sure, perfection, sure, be incredible, but like, you know, we're okay with a little bit of imperfection, like, you know. So I started to think more about that at that time. And, you know, amazingly, I had people who were proactive about wanting to support me in doing that. So like, oh my God, I see you're doing this thing. How can I help? How can I be a part of it? You know, and Inkem, who's the producer on the show now, she was the first one to reach out. I think like after show 2, she was like, yeah, this is dope. I want to be a part of it. Like, you know, and her thing was just like, I just want to learn at the time. She was like, I just want to, you know, how do you plug guitars into amps? You know, like stuff like that, you know. And we've just like grown it since. So in terms of like curating the space, like the intimacy, the tenderness, like that's by design. Like it won't be the show if we don't do that well, and if we don't try to do that at all. You know, like that. You know, I think that's what separates us from anything else. And then there's the like artist selection, there's the genre, there's the set design is really key. Like what people see like visually. I'm a very visual person, so you know, making sure there's a visual aesthetic that I connect with is really important, and then making sure there's a visual aesthetic that people can see and feel, and it immediately makes them go like, oh, that's Tiny's Condo Session. Like, you know, I recognize that. I want to be there actually. Like, oh my God, like, how can I be a part of this? That kind of stuff. Yeah.
I love that. I love that. I think 2 things. Toronto people are always here for a great time. Yes. It doesn't matter if the great time is in Oshawa. They will be there. I remember going to Ashake's concert, and I was seeing people that were commuting from like the wildest parts of the GTA, and I was just like, you know what? One thing about us, we love a good time, but something else I'm really appreciating is that it has gone beyond you, and it has kind of opened up another space, like a niche. I found that a lot of times when people start out things, the first question is more, how do I make money off of this? Yes. It's not necessarily how do I create a space where people belong. It's more so, how can I make this profitable? And maybe, of course, capitalism, that's the world we live in. Everything has a price tag. But so far, you've been able to create this. It's free to attend. You don't pay the artists that perform. But people are still willing to show up, both to perform and both to be entertained. I think that's such a niche creation that, honestly, for lack of a better word, blows my mind. But most importantly, blows my mind because it's rare to find, maybe it's not rare, maybe it's just my circle, but I think it's rare to find Nigerians that know how to be tender. I think by default, we're like loud, we're brash, we're like shouting, we want people to know we're there. but somehow you've kind of defied the odds. But no, that's I guess my interesting take from our conversation so far.
Thank you for that. Like I would say that the brashness, the loudness, the letting people know that we are there, all of these things, like I see all of those things in myself, you know, and like I wasn't called a shipwreck for no reason.
Right,
you know?
Actually, right.
And so, then, like, I think...
two of your nicknames quite contradict themselves. And I think you've been able to embody both.
Oh, mad. Thank you. No, I probably psychologically and emotionally, I definitely went through a phase of like not loving those things about myself, right? And like, and really, really not loving it, and really feeling like those things were an issue and problematic, and were holding me back, and we're doing all of these things, right? And we're doing all these negative things. And I certainly went through a period, like I would say my late teens, early 20s, where I was actually forced to revisit how to interact with that version of myself, those versions of myself. Like being loud is totally fine if you're like alerting people that there's a fire. You know what I mean? So loudness in itself is not a negative trait, right? It's just like the appropriateness of that loudness, you know? And being tender is great, and it's loving, and it's amazing, except if there's a fire, you need to get people going. Saying that softly is not the way to, you know what I mean? So context becomes this like higher lens, higher way of engaging with this stuff. And I think in the context of like, you know, a show, in the context of music, in the context of artistry and creativity, like the traits that I really wanted to elevate in myself is kind of like the direction I went in with the show. So, you know, thank you for highlighting that, and thank you for seeing that. Around business and, you know, money and getting people paid and all that jazz, I think what made last year's run really possible in terms of like my mindset was the fact that for years before, you know, I had been trying to build YAWA in a lot of ways, in a lot of different ways that mirror exactly what you said. So the first time we started, it's like, oh, how do we make a podcast audio company that makes money? Like, you know, that's what I started studying. Like, okay, like how do you get ads going? How do you do this and you do that? And like, very quickly you learn that like revenue drivers are really hard to find. And if you want to make anything good, you're going to be investing, you're going to be spending money, but like, you know, how you think about making money needs to be very different, and like what are you spending on, and this and that, like all that jazz. And so we failed. I've gotten very comfortable describing it as a failure now, but we failed at the first version of what we were doing, and we needed to. Like I see it now, like we needed to fail because you need to kind of really work really hard at something and it not go well, and then take a step back and look at what the hell you were doing and why you were doing it this way and what you were trying to accomplish and this and that. And like as soon as you begin to understand that, like, you know, people have no problem paying for value, but only if they see the value and you're not shouting value at them. This is valuable is different than like them innately knowing that it's valuable, you know? So I spent a lot of the first bit of like, you know, trying to build the company being like, this is valuable. This is really valuable. And like, you say it a couple of times, you're like, okay. Rather than like, and that's telling, rather than like showing. And when if you create something of value that's meant to, like, your revenue drivers will reveal themselves, you know?
Absolutely.
And like, you know, bringing it back to artists and like the point of why I'm doing all these things and like what I want to do is like, I'm not comfortable asking artists to come play for free. Like that is a very uncomfortable thing to do because, you know, there's hobbyists, you know, I would say like I was a hobbyist guitarist before or hobbyist singer before, and there's people who are presenting themselves in the world in a certain way and would like to earn a living from that. And it's important to me philosophically to honor that always. And so it's equally important for me to create something or some version of what it is that we're doing that can reward artists for their time, right? The version of Tiny Condo Session that people are familiar with, it's really, really tough to do that, pay artists that is, and also ask people to pay for something that you haven't quite defined. So that was the struggle last year. It's like, I'm not asking people to come to my house and pay money for stuff that like I'm not really sure what they're paying for here. Like, you know, until we've done it, you know, I think now we're on show 15 or something. Like, until we've done it really 10 times, like you don't really know what you're doing. Like, why do people come here? You know, it's still a question. Like, and I know I'm an arrogant or egotistical person at times.
Oh, you do?
You know, for the first 4, you're like, oh, they love Folarin.
They must love me.
You know, they're here to hear me talk. They're here to hear me sing. And like, and maybe some people, because they've seen some things, are here for that. But like, that's not sustainable at all. And so until we figured out some aspects, and I think we're still in the process, like it's, you know, I think it's very difficult to ask people to pay for something that you haven't quite defined. And then on the flip side, how do you present this to artists as something that they would be willing to do for no compensation, right? And like we're figuring that and are still figuring out how to do that effectively and do that well. But it's definitely still a journey.
I love that. And I think just to reiterate what I've learned from your story is that sometimes it's okay to start even when you haven't figured out the full picture. Like you said, MVP. I think a lot of times when people think about MVP, they think about it in the tech sense of things, where it's just like, okay, this is the first draft of my website or my product, but sometimes it's like the first draft of your idea in real life, and then you're able to fine tune up to the point where you realize your value added proposition to people, and then you start to make revenue.
And it'll cost you something, you know.
Of course.
The 6 shows last year, you know. Do you mind if I talk numbers?
Sure.
Yeah, like the 6 shows last year totally cost me $2,400 in total. At the end of the summer, it was like, okay, well, I've spent this much money and I've done this many times, but I didn't care about it. Like, I didn't care about the money because it brought me so much just as a person, but I loved that I was detailed enough to know that this is what 6 shows cost.
Right.
You know what I mean?
It's important.
Yeah, so now if I'm trying to generate revenue for 6 shows, I know I need to generate 2,400 plus, you know, to be able to make anything. And then that's the business education sort of coming in play, right? Just being like, okay, well, this is how much we need to make this possible, right? And so what's our runway to break even, to make this, you know, like how do we attract all the other stuff?
No, money is definitely important. If there's anything I know, money is important, but it's definitely not the driving force in every situation. Context matters, ideas are important, and sometimes starting is what matters. Yes. But before I let you go, do you want to paint me a picture of what YAWA Media, Tiny Condos, all the things you're working on, what that could look like in the future? If think about your wildest dreams.
My wildest dreams?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. My wildest dream, you know, in the present is that somebody really, really, really interested, somebody or some corporation or some entity really, really interested in investing in emerging acts, emerging artists, but also like an audience and the fans and the people who love this kind of intimacy, writes us a check and says, produce 6 seasons of this, 10 seasons of this, how many seasons. And you know, and these entities usually have a way of figuring out how they make the check make sense, right? But for me, the key is, can I pay artists? And can I reduce the cost or reduce the burden on the fans, right? Like, if fans can come for free and I can pay artists.
Win-win.
Beautiful, the chef's kiss, that's exactly, and hopefully pay myself a little bit. Let me not be too humble. But that, you know, that's an absolute dream, right? You know, whoever is interested and like sees what we're doing and connects with it, if they can help us do that, that'll be amazing. And then from a functional standpoint, in terms of what YAWA does outside of like live production, I really, really love working with creative people and helping them actualize and realize their dream or whatever version of life in creativity kind of like looks like. And for me, that means me getting better at doing that, you know, getting better at being a representative when I'm talking to distributors, or getting better at building a plan, sticking that plan through, executing it, you know. So for me, the future is just skill-wise improving myself. That, and also I think as a leader, for lack of a better term, to be able to sort of bring other people into this who kind of want to move in that direction and kind of want to provide that work and build a structure that allows them to do that work. You know, like I'm so sorry I'm picking on accountants, but like nobody grows up wanting to like be the best accountant in the world, you know, like I've never spoken to a single 6-year-old who's like, I want to run the best numbers,
right?
You know, like
great at Excel.
Yeah, you know, like
love it.
But people really dream about music and creativity and film and art and all that stuff, you know, early, you know, really, really early. And so if I can create a company that allows people to do work in that space, and I say work like this because, like, you know, when I'm drafting contracts and sending that out, I'm not like living the dream, you know, like, but like
meaningful work,
like, that still needs to be done, right? And so if I can be better at attracting resources and growing our company so that like some 19-year-old at Seneca who needs to intern somewhere can come work with us, and then when they graduate, we can afford to pay them a decent salary to come work with us and build the careers of people. Like, that would be heaven. That would feel phenomenal. And then if someday if Sony buys my company for $25 million and I get to retire and buy a yacht, that would be
here for it. You know what? I'm gonna save
golden.
your number because
You didn't save my number yet?
Stop.
What?
Oh no, I love this. This has been such a great conversation. Where can people find you?
Well, you can find me at Ship Wreck Flo.
Shipwreck Flo.
On every platform. It's spelled shipwreck, like a shipwreck, and Flo, F-L-O.
When is the next Award with Flo episode coming out?
You know, this is a great question people have been asking.
Right, because it's been a year.
It's been some time. You know, I should challenge myself and to produce more. I think when I started doing Tiny Condo Session, it just kind of consumed me, and I had plans to get back into producing. I actually produced an episode for Award with Flo in November that I've been sitting on because you know
it's June.
Yeah,
it's almost July now.
It is almost July. You're totally correct.
Right.
So it should be soon. Did you enjoy the one that you listened to?
I did. Yeah. But I don't want it to your horn. So.
But
it was great.
Give me my flowers.
I think I really like the one in silence.
Yeah. Silence is kindness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that was my favorite episode. But
why so? What did you get from it?
Because I think growing up, my parents misunderstood my silence a lot, and it was always like, oh, if Nina is silent, she's angry. But sometimes I'm just tired of talking.
Yeah, I definitely should produce more of the podcasts. I struggle with completing.
Maybe talk about
things.
that on the podcast.
Yeah, nice. Well, also it's like you know, sometimes when I take time and space away from things, I'm not sure how it will be received when I come back, and that holds me back a lot. So now that you've given me the go ahead, or at least the like, you know, it's fine if it's been X amount of months, you know, like it's okay, like you used to be there. So
see, I know you're an arrogant person, but something someone told me before was that we think too highly of ourselves in terms of how much people think about us,
right.
And that it's okay to take a break and rest on your ability to come back, because like you said earlier, where there's value, people are tuned in innately. And so I've found that the times I've taken a break, even from regular mundane things, and come back, it's always been like, oh, we missed you. And it's like, or, oh, where have you been? Or like, or sometimes they're just like, glad you're back. Or sometimes they don't say anything, but like, it's never oh, I'm never listening to you again, or, oh, who are you?
People are more graceful than we think.
People are more
graceful. We suffer more in imagination up here.
Yeah, and also people are more like, people have other things on their minds as well. And so maybe that fuels the grace to be like, oh, of course you had things to do, and now you're back. We're just glad to have you back. But that said, yes, you should produce another one, and you should talk about completing things.
Yeah. Okay, no, dope. I hope the takeaway from this chat, though, isn't that I'm an arrogant person.
Well, that's definitely my takeaway, you know.
Mad. Arrogance can be good as long as it matches up with your ability.
Okay, now you're cooking.
A little too much.
But no, it's been great having you
on
on the podcast, and thank you to you guys for listening and tuning in. Once again, I am your host, Nina Barango. I will see you next Monday. Bye.